Well, here we are again with yet another Lunatic Talks. I apologize for the lack of uploads recently, so to make it up, I've worked up this special episode of Lunatic Talks covering the unspeakably horrifying case of Junko Furuta. Without further ado, let's jump straight in. Our story takes place in Japan, specifically the city of Misato, located in the Saitama prefecture. Here lived a girl by the name of Junko Furuta. She was generally your typical teenage girl. As a matter of fact, she was quite the popular girl in school because of her outgoing personality and kind, stay-out-of-trouble nature. However, among all the normal students lay a horrible monster, barely classified as a human being. Hiroshi Miyano was the name of a bully at the school, and not only that, he was part of the Yakuza. The Yakuza are, in my opinion, an even scarier force than your typical hood gangster or Italian mafia member. If you've seen the movie Ichi the Killer, you may think the acts of the Yakuza in the film are greatly exaggerated for shocking effect, but really, that's just them. Because of this overarching power, everyone bowed down to Miyano and just did as he said, lest they anger the Yakuza. On the other hand, Junko worked hard for her respect. She was not only attending school full-time, but was also working part-time at a plastic molding factory at just 17 years old. In November 1988, Junko planned to work at an electronics retail store when she graduated from school. Junko's dream was to become a famous idol pop singer. Everything was going perfectly well for the young girl. Miyano and his friends were known to be dangerous gang rapists. Miyano worked as a tile worker and lived with his girlfriend. All in all, Miyano was the stark opposite of Junko, a brute, a bully, a bastard with no future to look forward to. Eventually, it seems Miyano's girlfriend learned or grew tired of his violent sexual escapades, and she cut him loose. Because of this, Miyano one day approached Junko and asked her out. However, Junko said no. It seems this was a point where Miyano's rage boiled over and he became obsessed. On November 25th, 1988, Miyano and his friend Shinji Minato were out taking a walk one late afternoon. As you can imagine, they were seeking women they could mug and rape. Unfortunately, this was around the time Junko would get off work. Miyano and Shinji spotted her, and they took the opportunity to devise a setup, a scheme. As Junko was riding home from work on her bike, Shinji suddenly attacked Junko and ran into her on purpose, shoving her off her bike and causing her to crash onto the pavement. It was at this point that Miyano stepped in and pretended to intimidate Shinji, to which Shinji took off. When this was over, Miyano told Junko it would be best if he walked Junko home to protect her. Junko reluctantly agreed, subsequently making the worst decision of her entire life. As the two walked, Miyano led Junko to a warehouse, to which he trapped her and revealed his connections with the Yakuza, and if she refused to do what he ordered her to do, or even dared to alert authorities, she would be murdered. It was here where Miyano took a hold of Junko and raped her. Later on, he and Junko went to a nearby hotel where Miyano booked a room and raped her once more. At 3 a.m., Miyano and Junko went to a park where his final two friends awaited, Joe Agora and Yosushi Watanabe. Miyano bragged to his friends about what he had done to Junko, and his friends began pickpocketing through Junko's knapsack. Inside the knapsack was a notebook. When they opened it, they found the notebook contained Junko's home address. Now they knew where she lived, and they used this as even more intimidation, saying if she attempted to escape or pull a fast one, they would murder not only her, but her entire family. Finally, they took her to Miyano's parents' house. When that front door shut, Junko would never step foot out of that house ever again. The boys discussed several things that they could do with Junko, like keep her captive and prostitute her to local men. 2 days later, far too late in my opinion, Junko's parents alerted police that they had not seen Junko ever since the day she was kidnapped. When Miyano and his friends learned of this, they made Junko call her parents to report that she had merely run off and that she was fine. Then they made her call police to make sure they wouldn't continue to search for her. Because of this, all attempts to search for Junko were put off. For days, Junko was mercilessly beaten and gang raped by the boys, and each time Miyano's parents stepped in, they forced her to play the role of his girlfriend. One evening, the boys were getting high off of cough syrup. At this point, Junko took a chance and tried to escape. However, before she could get distance, she was tripped by Miyano and another one of the boys smothered her with a pillow. Minato's parents woke up due to the commotion, to which Shinji simply reassured them and sent them back to bed. As Junko fell unconscious due to suffocation, she was gang raped again. This followed each subsequent escape attempt by Junko, to the point where it wasn't even worth trying anymore. Suddenly, one day the police showed up to the home due to the fact that one of the boys Miyano invited over had told his brother of the actions going on in that home, and the brother told the parents, and the parents told the cops. However, Minato's parents told police that no such girl was in their house. The police decided to do no further investigation, forever dooming Junko. This was the last time police ever showed up to that home. During the time Junko was there, the boys forced her to do such acts like masturbate in front of them for their pleasure. They would also feed her live cockroaches. They hung Junko from the ceiling, and they all beat and brutalized her like a punching bag. They used an assortment of weaponry like golf clubs, bamboo sticks, iron bars. On top of the physical violence, Junko was rarely, almost never, given food or water. This caused her to grow weaker with time. On the 7th day, Junko had been raped over 100 times. To attempt to keep her crippling starvation at bay, Junko lived on old expired milk, cockroaches, and liquor. And if the boys felt generous enough, they would give Junko small scraps of food that they ate. It was around this time that Japan was transitioning into a harsh winter. The boys made Junko sleep outside on the balcony completely naked. They continued to beat her frail, bony body daily and made her sit in the freezer. On the 9th day, the boys were eating a meal of grilled chicken on skewers, to which they got the sickly idea to shove the sharp skewers into her vagina and rectum, tearing and causing heavy bleeding. On this day, Junko made another escape effort. Though her body at this point was broken and tortured, so she was not exactly in the greatest shape. She made her way to a phone and dialed for the police. But before she could get a single word out, Miyano suddenly grabbed the phone from her hand, to which he assured police once again that everything was absolutely fine. For this, Junko was tied up and Miyano poured dripping candle wax on her. However, this simply would not do. They then poured lighter fluid on her legs and set them ablaze. At this point, Junko began to convulse from the grisly amount of pain and began to have a seizure. The boys simply set her legs on fire once again. Amazingly, Junko was still alive. Passed out, but alive. Of course, they began to rape her once again. At this point, the boys began to prostitute Junko and sell her body to local men willing to exchange money to rape her. One day, as they had her tied to the ceiling and were beating her, they caused so much damage to her internal organs that Junko began to cough up blood from her mouth and nose and began drowning in her own blood. She was also no longer being given leftovers when the boys ate, and they even forced her to drink her own piss. They also did not stop setting her legs on fire. At this point, by day 20, Junko, after being beaten, starved, and suffering from an infection due to her legs regularly being set on fire, was no longer able to walk and barely move. If she wanted to use the bathroom, she would have to crawl for an hour down to the washroom. As days passed, she couldn't even drag herself to the washroom and had no choice but to piss and shit on the floor. The boys would beat her whenever she did so. Now she couldn't even drink or eat as her body slowly began to shut down, and she experienced frequent vomiting and dehydration. For every vomit, followed a beating. On day 26, hell truly broke loose. I have to warn you, this might be hands down one of the most violent and graphic descriptions I think I will ever give on Lunatic Talks. The boys were serving Junko her regular beatings, which included jumping and stomping on her face and shoving bottles, lit cigarettes, scissors, and iron bars into her rectum and vagina. Then, one of the boys came up with a truly stomach-churning suggestion. They held Junko down and shoved a hot, lit light bulb into her vagina. They then punched her in the abdomen so hard, the light bulb bursted inside of her. They shoved fireworks in her ears and exploded them, and they burned her with cigarette lighters. This caused her eardrums to permanently rupture and caused her to no longer be able to hear well. They would get mad when she didn't hear them, of course, and beatings ensued. So they set off fireworks inside her mouth and anus. They also forced her to chug gallons of alcohol, sniff paint thinner, and smoke multiple cigarettes. At this point, Junko was no longer even able to move. Junko's face was beyond swollen, and her wounds had become so infected and rotten she reeked like a corpse. At this point, they didn't even want to rape her anymore due to her appearance and smell. They dripped candle wax into her eyes and even slammed dumbbells onto her hands, smashing and breaking her hands and fingers. On New Year's Day, Junko was left alone for the first time, but this didn't matter. Her broken and shattered body couldn't even muster up a single sound, let alone move. She was essentially a living corpse. At this point, Junko begged and pleaded to just be killed and be done with, but the boys wouldn't let her die so easily. On the final day, Junko's brain had shrunken severely due to the damage and torture. That day, the boys had gone out and played a game of mahjong. Miyano lost the game and went absolutely berserk. When they got back, everyone began gang beating her, smacking her legs with sticks, and pushing her into a stereo set. The stereo set broke and collapsed, and Junko began having another seizure, excreting pus and blood from her wounds. To avoid interacting with these fluids, the boys put plastic bags on their hands and began beating her. They slammed a dumbbell on her stomach and set her entire body on fire. As the fire died down, the boys left the room. As Junko lay on the ground, after all this time of torture and suffering, hell and misery, Junko's body gave in and she passed away. A while later, Minato's brother walked into the room Junko was in and found her corpse. He told Minato that Junko was dead, so all the boys wrapped her in sheets and stuffed her body into a travel suitcase. They took the body to a remote location and placed it inside of a 55-gallon metal barrel. They filled the barrel with wet concrete and left the body in a plot of land. On January 23, 1989, Hiroshi and Joe were arrested because of a gang rape they had committed. Miyano thought the police already knew what they had done, so he confessed to the location of Junko's corpse. The police didn't even know what he was referring to. On March 3rd, police traveled to the location of the concrete drum. Encased in it was Junko's body. After being identified by fingerprints, an autopsy was done on her. They found pieces of glass lodged inside her and even discovered she had been pregnant. All the boys were arrested and their identities were exposed to the public by journalists. In total, Junko had been raped over 500 times. Many of these men have still never been identified. However, because of the age of the boys, they were charged as minors, and most faced merely 10 years in prison. Due to this, the parents of the boys vandalized the grave of Junko and called her a whore. Junko's mother required psychiatric therapy when she learned what had happened to her daughter. On April 2nd, 1989, Junko's funeral was held. A memorial of one of her friends read, "Jun-chan, welcome back. I have never dreamed that we would see you again in this way. You must have been in so much pain, so much suffering. The happy we all made from the school festival looked really good on you. We will never forget you. I have heard that the headmaster has presented you with a graduation certificate. So we graduated together, all of us, Jun-chan. There is no more pain, no more suffering. Please rest in peace." The future employer of Junko gave her parents the uniform Junko was going to wear when she had gotten the job, and they placed it in her casket. During the graduation ceremony, the principal gave Junko's parents her diploma. Miyano's mother sold her home to be able to pay the $425,000 in US money to Junko's family. The location where her body was found is now a park. As of right now, all of Junko's murderers are currently free, and Junko's resting place is not known. And that is the story of Junko Furuta. Honestly, what can I say about this case that hasn't been said already? It's haunting, it's brutal, sadistic, and sad. I can't help but get like a little choked up right now reading this. You might be like, oh, don't be pussy, but you gotta think about all the unimaginable evil that was done to this poor innocent girl. And the fact that all the killers are still out there now is just crazy, you know. Laws were not like how they are now, you know. They were really, really bad. And they still kind of are in some ways, in some aspects. I hope you guys enjoyed this special episode of Lunatic Talks. Again, I'm real sorry I haven't been posting that much, but I plan to change that. Excuse me. And I plan to make more videos for you guys. I promise. More videos will be coming out soon, so stay tuned for them. Thank you guys so much for watching this special episode of Lunatic Talks, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye-bye.